This time we're going to be talking about how to get more VC investment into Western Australian companies. Following on from our previous two sessions, the last one was on does WA need a 100 mil VC fund. As usual, we record these sessions so you can go back and get your value bonds, a term that my colleague Steve here loves, and tell all your friends about it who didn't come along. And we're very lucky today to have some visitors from afar. From Melbourne and Adelaide, we've got Rachael and Elaine. Thank you very much for joining us. Over here for the West Tech Fest, which the big conference day starts tomorrow. Don't know if there's tickets available still. Always good value if there are. And we just thought it would be an excellent opportunity to get their expertise and knowledge that we just don't have. Well, we have expertise and knowledge in Perth, but we don't have their expertise and knowledge. So before I get onto it, I just wanted to outline, why we've picked these people. And you'll notice there's an extra person at the table as well. I'll get to Kath in a minute. So basically, around the table we've got some great expertise about the people who've been involved with increasing the amount of capital available in other states in Australia. So Elaine was involved with both Queensland and South Australia, getting VC funds established there with a local focus. Also involved with setting up the VC fund for Blue Sky. Rachael's got a huge amount of experience. She was responsible for bringing Eventbrite the manager for bringing Eventbrite into Australia. She was on the the LaunchVic board for a period, and now heads up AWS startups. So thanks very much for making the trip. From places nearer, we have Kath, who used to be a VC and is now, both with Stonebridge Ventures, quite an old venture capital fund which doesn't really exist anymore. The company does, but they haven't. When did Stonebridge close? 2008, okay. And she's now the managing director of Oncores. One of the very few Western Australian companies, possibly the only one to hit East Coast VC in the last 2 years. So thank you for coming. David Cannington is co-founder of Nuheara, spent 25 years in San Francisco, so a huge amount of experience in the space. And interestingly, Nuheara is ASX, not backed by the ASX, it's publicly listed stock. And Dan has joined us Dan Hookham from Level 19, who have just set up a fund to invest in companies, or in software companies on the Microsoft stack. So I'll let them all introduce themselves further in a moment. So just go through the agenda for today. We've had the first bit. I'm just going to give a bit of a presentation about Techboard and what we do, and a bit of a background on some funding data for WA. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there, but there's a lot of material on our website that you can refer to. The way the Techboard Roundtables work is we basically have a conversation around the table and then break for questions at the end. So a slightly different dynamic to the normal panel session, and we found they work very well, so I hope you enjoy it. And we'll have some networking and drinks at the end, after some question and answer from the audience. So big thanks to our major supporters, RSM, who've been with us now this is the 5th roundtable we've done with RSM. That included one in Sydney and one in Melbourne as well. And thanks very much for the support of AWS as well. And to a bunch of our partners that help get our message out there. Scale, my co-founder, Raf, sitting in the back. He's the guy with the other Techboard t-shirt on, you can't miss him. Thanks, Raf. So Raf also runs Scale Partners locally, so they're helping us out with financial matters. Do you want to say a quick word or?
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool. And I also wanted to shout out to 65 Bits. Bruce isn't here. No. So 65 Bits have helped us with some of the scrapers that we're using to collect our funding data. I also wanted to put a shout out to Bloom, Jasmine Ward. Put your hand up. Thanks, Jasmine. So Bloom's helped us with the promotion of this event, and we're really happy to be partnering with Bloom because it's an association. It's a group of students at UWA interested in startup and entrepreneurship, and Jasmine's been involved with it for some time. And this is, we're talking about the future of our kids here. So I think it's great that we can work with a student group like that. And our data customers and sponsors. So Techboard isn't about doing events, we're about capturing funding data that we make available to the ecosystem to help inform its growth, but we monetize by selling it to these guys. We're working to broaden our audience, our customer base into the investment space. We've got some interesting products that we're looking at the moment that will hopefully make our data more compelling to a broader audience, including all of you in the room, if you're looking to inform yourself about raising capital. But more about that later. So here's an example of our funding report. The latest one we put out back in October. We launched that at a roundtable we did in Melbourne. Basically, all of these reports are freely available. In order to access the underlying data, you need to be a paid subscriber, but you'll find the reports very useful. They provide overviews, breakdowns by sector, state, and different funding types. So a lot of interesting insights can be gleaned from them, and I'll show you some of those in a moment. Our funding data is being captured in a lot of press. Most recently, we've partnered with Startup Daily on some events and got a lot of coverage there, but we've been on these other channels as well. So, I'm going to give you a very brief snapshot of startup and tech funding in Western Australia. And this, if you've been to a previous Techboard Roundtable, you'll have seen almost all of this. We're just adding in the latest iteration on the data, but this is probably quite interesting for our visitors. Just want to highlight the range of great companies that have been getting funded here. Now, I think all of most of these have raised funding in the last couple of years. Some are a little bit got funded a little bit earlier, but you'll see some massive names here. So biggest ones that would have hit the press a lot. Damn, I cut off the R for Power Ledger. Power Ledger, Health Engine, Spookfish did a massive exit, got to 136 million in 4 years. ASX funded. Paincheck's a spin out of Curtin. Family Zone did a big deal with JB Hi-Fi recently about, so that's cyber safety for families. So there's a big mix of privately funded and publicly funded, but as you'll see in the next couple of slides, the significance of the public funding has been, in Western Australia, is much higher than in other states. So this slide here looks at, we've got more data on WA than we have on the other states. We started collecting it earlier here. You can't read all of it, but I'll point to the relevant bits. So this black line here is public funding. That's a combination of IPOs and placements. And so this is tracking back to December quarter 2016, right through to the June quarter. This year. And the private funding is this blue line here. Big spikes, that was Health Engine and Isotana. This one's here is Sperion. But you'll see it's not really thriving. And the yellow line here is overall funding. This spike is the acquisition of Spookfish for 136 mil. Going back here, you're probably looking at, this would be Power Ledger, Fast Brick doing a 35 mil placement. So this is 100 mil here. So we've got a couple of periods where there was a lot of activity and then others where it drops off. So moving to across Australia, the blue line at the top is the totals. So you've got the relevant ones here. These don't line up directly with the other ones because IPOs and placements are split out. But if you look at placements, it's this dark green one here. It's not as a significant thing as it is in WA. And private funding is the red one. And the yellow one are the IPOs. I think I might have got a wrong number on one of those. But if you look at this is distribution by funding type, WA versus the rest of Australia. So placements, this is money going into already listed companies, the acquisition, so this is just last financial year. And so nationally, this was the PEXA acquisition, which was very, very big. A large part of the private, Judo Bank did 940 million in that financial year. You also had massive raises by Airwallex did a combined 250 million. Everyone would have heard about Canva. So the big end of town's getting bigger, but if you compare the size of the pie there compared to WA, and it's just, we don't have active VC here, and we don't get a lot of large investments on an ongoing basis. So that is a slide that I was going to put something on. I think on this one I was going to show I had some technical issues, but the percentage of funding, national funding that WA is securing has dropped from the previous year. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I shouldn't be running a data company without having a memory for numbers. So, yeah. So, really keen to encourage companies when they raise to report to Techboard. We do get some reports. Some companies are reporting to Crunchbase as well. Our data on Australia is much better than theirs. And we are starting to, governments are relying on the data that they get from us. We're about to renew our first customer, which was Department of Industry, Innovation and Science. And really keen to get the best data that we can, which we need your help for. Most of what we get is from the media scraping. And so I'll hand over to Steve and let the roundtable begin.
Awesome, thanks Pete. Thank you all, welcome. Our superstar panelists are ready to enrol for us. Welcome startups, thank you for making your time to come here in the heat. You persevered through the heat, so we better make sure we give you the value you need. And like Pete said, we're here to drop the value bombs. Well, that's what these guys are here for. So we've got a lot of time. That is also a really good thing for us, because these guys can probably talk the whole hour or whatever it is each. So they will get plenty of time to answer the questions and take the questions wherever they want to go. Yeah, we're lucky enough to be here for the third time in Perth, and what we're here to do is just to explore the conversation that Pete's kindly kicked off for us. And Techboard, what they add, what they give us as a community is data, and as the great saying goes, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So how do we manage our innovation ecosystem if people like Pete and Rachael aren't putting the effort in to get us the data? So thank you boys, it's respected and needed across Australia. So we will use it today as much as we can, but we all know what you can do with stats. So we won't let any of our panellists get too carried away. Rachael's pretty keen on data, so we've already called that one out.
But when we basically can throw the questions around, you can answer them however you want. You can take the conversation in the direction you think it should go. With Pete has brought you together because you're all experts and superstars from around the world, from varying backgrounds and skill sets and experiences. So it would be incorrect of me to question you and then contain you in your answers. So we want you to be uncontained and freewheeling, as long as we can move it along a little bit. So to kick it off, and again the question, so we may start off with the question, but the answers we're looking for often take better questions. So the better the question, the better the result, the better the answer. So if you think we need to reframe the questions and move it on in a different direction, please do so, because it's the questions that will give us the answers we need. So Pete's given us loads of questions, and I'll go away from those and start with mine.
You almost say.
I know, the same lines, but the new panel. That's good. Let me kick it off with, and you came up with basically those read questions down from when you're talking. You said WA, the kick-off is how to get more VC investment in WA companies. But then what you said is, which is really interesting, active involvement of VCs in WA companies. So let's just, if we can, just kick that off a little bit. And what do we think we get out of, and how do we? Well, let's just start with what we get out of more active VC investment in a community, and let's use WA as the community. So what does active VC investment give us as a community? Who wants to go? It's too hard to start. Come.
Let's give it a go to kick it off. Well, WA is a beautiful place to live. I've had the privilege of seeing a lot of our country and a fair bit of the world. And WA is a fantastic place to come home to. Dave spent 30 years in Sanfra and chosen WA as home for now. That's welcome. But one of the challenges that we have in WA, as we do partly in South Australia, I would argue as well, is that our population doesn't necessarily lend itself to having a high proportion of people with experience in things that are arguably more prevalent elsewhere in the world. So if you go to New York, you go to London, you go to San Francisco, the proportion of people that you can come across, that you can work with, that you can get experience from, is higher by pure numbers. In WA, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. It's not to say that we don't have people with that skill, and per capita, it's probably an equal set of people who are skilled enough to build their own business, to get going, to get involved. But from a VC perspective, you need certain points and certain thresholds to invest your time and your money. And if those people aren't able to get access to the skills, the experience, the mentorship, all the bits that they need to do more, then it becomes a very challenging place to be. So from that perspective, and like you said, I could talk for an hour and a half. From that perspective, one of the things that we would take from more VC or a more active VC involvement in WA is that we would get a bit more of that experience. We get a bit more of the what else is happening across the world, what have other people in more comparable situations been through and how they're addressing it. And that's one of the things that we see from that perspective.
Great, thank you. That's the depth of knowledge expands. Thank you. Can you know that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if VC is done well, it should provide something that's more than just capital. And the interesting thing that you showed on that data block was just where there has been a gap for venture capital. It's being filled by the IPO market, which is great for money, but it's maybe not so great if actually what you want as a startup is access to skills and networks from people who've done it before, or in your industry, or connections to industry or corporate partners. And if VC is done well, that's what they should be providing you with, as well as capital. But I think beyond just what is an active VC from an investment perspective, and the others can also talk to this, I think the other thing that venture capital actually does provide to the ecosystem is patient risk capital. And I'm just going to massively drop a name here, because I did just do a course at MIT, and one of the things that was, in fact, the only thing I took from that course was that there are 5 things you absolutely need to have for an innovation ecosystem to really thrive. Entrepreneurs, obviously. If there's no entrepreneurs, we have no ideas, we have no startups. You need to have active engagement from government, you need to have active participation from industry, you need but you also need risk capital, because you can't you will have a gap in that supply chain, which is required to give the time needed for that innovation ecosystem to really build and prosper, particularly when it's failing and you've got to build out a big funnel, you've got to have a lot of things that don't work. And so therefore you need that patient capital to be persistent in an ecosystem for a long period of time and have that persistence of knowledge transfer. So from an ecosystem perspective, not just an individual company perspective, I think patient risk capital is really important, or else you sort of get a lot of activity and then it dies off.
Rachael, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I want to almost disaggregate some of the things that Dan was saying around critical mass in an ecosystem and how that attracts investment, but then also your original question, which is how does investment activity help? I think that Elaine hit the nail on the head when she talks about patient risk capital, and to further that to your question, what I think we need is once we have critical mass, and there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem here, is we need choice, right? And I think that in Australia still money is concentrated in too few funds. That's changing, right? We're seeing new funds blossom up all the time. And so I think sometimes our stats distort the story because we see that we are deploying quite a bit of capital into the system, but it's being heavily concentrated right now in 3-4 big funds. And I think that entrepreneurs need choice, just like consumers need choice. And I think that the more activity we can have, and especially in a place like WA, where we have different types of investors, again, when VC is done well, there's a pretty important relationship that happens between investor and founder that's largely based on expertise and chemistry and network and all the things that she or he can bring to the table. And so I want to see more democratization of that money and more choice for founders.
That's awesome, thank you. And so, Kath?
I couldn't agree with Rachael more about that. We need to have choice both as the investors and also as the entrepreneurs. Investors tend to stick to their knitting, so they'll have things they really like investing in, either because they've made money in that space before, or that's a particular area of expertise that they had going into the fund. So I think for WA, it's incredibly important that we look to attract not just one fund, but we need to attract access to a number of different funds who will be willing to fund different businesses.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the way I look at it is investment capital will come with these great companies and great entrepreneurs. So Western Australia has to do a better job of selling their ability to build great businesses. You know, you've got to build an ecosystem in Western Australia that has some critical mass around not just one company, but a multitude of companies. That you can then go as a united front to the East Coast or wherever you want to go and say, hey, you need to come over to Western Australia a couple of times a year or every quarter and have a look at the really great companies that have been grown here. You've got to give them a reason to come over here. Reality is most Western Australian entrepreneurs spend their time on planes going to the East Coast. And I think this week is a great example of Western Australia at least attempting to attract people who are influencers into the ecosystem here. But at the end of the day, I think Western Australia has to do a much better job of convincing people that this is a great place to invest money. And the only way to do that is through success. We've got to have some successes here.
We don't have community collaboration working together. Everyone wants to make money and then
sorry, we'll
live
keep.
here or live somewhere else.
That's awesome. We want the comment. We've got the Q&A at the end, so we will hold that. So thank you for your comments. You can cheer and clap, but we won't be taking questions till the end. Yeah? No booing.
I agree with David. When we were chatting and I was hearing about how successful his company is, I couldn't help but think, what an amazing story. It is still an isolated incident rather than a phenomenon. And when you want to get people to come out to WA, you need more critical mass. And I'll be completely transparent. So I'm building my team in AWS and actually placing a person in each major ecosystem. We've decided not to invest boots on the ground in WA yet because there just isn't the critical mass, and Adelaide isn't there yet either. And so if you think about what are those ingredients that would get a large company to invest a person, to get a VC or many VCs to come over more frequently than the first week of December for West Tech Fest, that's where we can start to think about stoking the fires of this ecosystem to attract more talent to live and build companies, more talent to come in and support those companies, more investment to fuel those companies.
That's awesome. Sorry, thank you. I'm only using this because I think we need it for that. So that's Excellent. That critical mass point is obviously really important. How big is critical mass? So you kicked it off there to say, okay, well, success stories and those sort of things. I noticed one of the things in your report, which was, blew me away with the number of accelerators in New South Wales. It's 53.5% of the Australian accelerator program. WA has 4.3%. Now, what do you have a comment? So if we're looking at building critical mass, and Rachael, were you involved in Startmates? Yeah. So I know on the budget you've got different experiences in that end as well, and building the skill set and the critical mass. So is chicken and egg? Is building the critical mass, and we've got some great accelerators here. Do we pump more into accelerators to help bring the quality, the skills out? Oh, here we go. Good. No? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm asking everybody, but whoever wants to kick off with that? Oh, you've got the mic already, David.
Okay, I've got one thought on that. It's not about critical mass. It's about success. It's about making sure those companies and entrepreneurs that have the true potential to be successful get the kind of support they need. I mean, so I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to accelerators. I've seen so many of them in my time in San Francisco. I think they're valuable so long as they have a really good process in place to be able to bring the champions to the top and allow them to succeed.
Yeah, and I guess one thing, one thing I'd say to add to that point in terms of now understanding what it takes to build a company in WA, which I sort of didn't have a few years ago, it is incredibly hard to find the experience and skills, going back to Dan's point, when we're looking currently to recruit into the team, and finding that person based in WA is going to be very difficult. The fact that we spend an awful lot of our budget on travel, because it's very important to have for people to see your face elsewhere in the world and on the East Coast. So there, we do have real challenges building companies in WA, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. So I think, looking at ways that we can help support the companies that are really trying to do it from WA. So whether that be in terms of investment, but also if there are other ways to help support them.
Oh look, this is maybe a controversial comment, but Rachael really wants like a scuffle. I think accelerators are a failing experiment in Australia, actually. And I think to the points that were just made, they can be a useful tool, but I think what we're learning is there's just not a one-size-fits-all approach where you can kind of create a sausage factory, put a whole bunch of startups through it, pop them out the other end, and there's like this paint-by-numbers version of they'll now be ready for the next step. So I think what they are trying to achieve is to put some structure and process and expertise around startups. I think we absolutely need that in all of our underdeveloped ecosystems, and the one I'm in at the moment in South Australia is absolutely no different to what you guys have here in WA. And having that expertise already here, that's tough. So we need to find ways to import that expertise and networks and knowledge base to sit around these startups. And it's really heavy lifting stuff. Like it's, to Kath's point before, like it takes a lot to try and build a company from scratch. A lot of heavy lifting, and that just can't be done in like a 6-month period, running them through a sausage factory. And there isn't, we need to make sure we have the right processes at the front end and the back end if we're going to try and put some of this stuff around startups. So that means there has to be funding at the end of it as well, whether that's funding here or from elsewhere. But right now, to Rachel's point, there's not a lot of, there aren't a lot of options because it is so concentrated at the moment.
I'm actually going to agree but pull back Elaine's comment slightly. I think that we let the pendulum swing way too far in the accelerator. That is the silver bullet answer, because it definitely is not. And I think that in spite of the hundreds of accelerators we have in Australia, there's probably only a handful of those that are doing their job in actually accelerating companies and getting them to a significantly different place than they would have had they not been part of the program. I'll tell you, there are a few trends that we're seeing in the market at AWS, and we're actually orienting our team differently, where it used to be that if we attached ourselves to the VCs and the accelerators or incubators, we would catch 90% of the great companies. And what we know now is actually we're entering this new phase of like mass decentralization. And we are having, more amazing bootstrap companies, people accessing capital for more creative avenues, people who are not going through traditional accelerators, I think, because, if we look at the last 5 years, they haven't always bore the fruit that they promised. And so actually, Rohit is here on my team. His title, he's the business development manager for the long tail. And what that means is we believe that there's a ton of value in all of these companies that are kind of hiding everywhere that aren't in these formal structures. And so we basically realized that if we attached our team to just VCs and accelerators, we would be missing probably 75% of companies and a ton of great, valuable companies. So I think there are some like big macro trends that are just changing the landscape, as well as this failed experiment or an overswing of the pendulum that created too many accelerators. I think that too much funding became available that like every man, woman, and their dog could spin up an accelerator, when really there are critical ingredients around funding, around deep mentorship and expertise for that phase of the company, for that industry that helps accelerate. And so, we're seeing much better leverage points in helping companies grow than accelerators.
Yeah, I don't think there's a great deal more to say on this particular topic, right? It's every fortnight here in WA, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, about somewhere between 40 and 70 people gather a bit further down that terrace, and they're all startup people, and they sit there and they listen to each other and they listen to guest speakers and so forth. So get an opportunity to meet a whole bunch of people across the WA startup scene. And the great thing about it is there's a community, but it's one of 5 communities in WA, and there's comparatively another 10 times that in other cities. So the community's a lot bigger to work from. But also the ability for these people, again, to get access to those people who can help structure their day. The number of people who are asking for money and can't tell you what their market is astounding, right? So the accelerators, I agree, you can't have a one-size-fits-all. It's just not the way life works in the slightest, right? But if you get something out of that as a startup, you can take some of that good stuff and then you can go the right direction. It doesn't fix the problem, it doesn't funnel it straight into the VC bucket, but it helps you get that a little bit further, then it's no bad thing. And certainly in a market like ours, where maturity is fairly low around this space, purely again due to population and availability of skills. Some of the guys do a great job, but if the expectation is that everybody who comes out is going to become a fully fledged global company who's going to get sold for $1 million, $100 million plus, that ain't going to happen. So,
can I just finish off a thought? I think it comes back to all great incubators have been successful because they've had really good people, really successful entrepreneurs who are super well connected to partners, to capital, etc., actively involved in the running of that incubator. If that does not exist, it's probably not going to be successful. So you've got to find, I believe that Australia's got to find their great entrepreneurs, whether they live here or overseas, and there's plenty of great expat entrepreneurs that are still overseas, and tap into that knowledge and wealth and leverage that some way. There's some organisations doing that on the global stage, like Advance, etc., but not super well. It's not as structured as it could be. But that's the great asset that Australia has. Great successful entrepreneurs, both here, plenty of them now, some great success stories over the last few years, but also overseas as well.
Sorry, can I add one more thing? So we've just been part of a global accelerator program, which was not something you'd expect. We've been VC funded for the last 3 years now, and it's certainly not something that any of the other branded portfolio companies have done. But we know that our first market's the US, and obviously we've been based in Perth. We needed to have greater access to the US, to have a greater understanding of our market. Particularly in healthcare, when you've got sort of 3 key things that you need to understand to be able to take your product to market, which are what does the regulator want, so the FDA or TGA, what what evidence is it going to take for insurers to pay for my product, and also what evidence are the doctors going to need to see to take my product up. So you really need to be immersed in your market to have an understand. They're all very complex, and it hurts my head to try and think about a way that we're going to manage to address them all. But we were part of the MedTech Innovator Accelerator program, which is LA based. It's a global program, and to David's point, it's run by an ex-VC who has the most unbelievable network, both in the US and across the world. He's brought in all, our potential acquirers, so they've got strategic partners, and it's those Johnson & Johnsons and Olympuses that choose the companies that get to participate every year. So you have access to that corporate mentorship for the 4-month virtual accelerator. It's specifically targeted to your company, so you set your needs at the beginning, and then they use their networks and resources to help you answer those needs by the end. And it gave us incredible exposure. So we presented at 3 of the major medical device companies, medical device conferences this year. And it is hard to raise money for medical devices in Australia. It was the first time going to those conferences that I felt love for medical devices, which was really quite unusual. So I think accelerators, when they run well and when you choose the one that's right for your company, can be incredibly valuable. But to David's point, it's about really finding the one that fits with what your needs are.
I just add one thing. When I started with my co-founder Nuheara, I was based in San Francisco, and we're a wearables company, right? Neither of us had experience in the wearables ecosystem. So I found a wearables incubator in San Francisco to get attached to. Now, I probably knew more about building businesses than a lot of people in that ecosystem, but they were incredibly valuable because they opened doors to us. Well, in San Francisco, there's an incubator for every industry, right? We don't have the luxury of that down in Australia. So there is some value in it. You just got to be careful.
I'd just like to step back to some of the comments that you were making before, David, about needing to bring, like West Tech Fest, bring the VCs, the investors, into Perth more often. Now, we've seen over the last few years a lot of interest in New Zealand from the East Coast VCs. And I think some of that was started when Ian Gardner was at AWS, because there was the tour in 2017, and then that followed with the Innovation Bay conference.
And I think that NZTE is doing a phenomenal job. So that's the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise Group. So Amit, who is Sydney-based. So this is the New Zealand government entity whose job it is to go overseas and attract people back to invest in New Zealand companies or showcase New Zealand companies. They do a really good job. So I would actually first put credit there, and that's just like a very highly focused, highly targeted, high-functioning government entity that's doing their job really well. And then New Zealand's just pumping out amazing companies. And so I'm actually quite bullish on New Zealand. Because the beauty of New Zealand is that no one starts a company in New Zealand and thinks that New Zealand is their market, right? Like, there's no way it's big enough, and so they truly are global from day one, and it's built into everything from their DNA, their architecture, their payments, processing, everything. They have to be global. And it's more like Israel. When you start a company in Tel Aviv, you don't think that Israel's your market, the world is your market. Australia has this, and I'm not, this is not an original thought anymore, but we have a market size that is comfortable enough that can confuse some people to think that it's big enough, but actually for VC backable companies, Australia as a market is just not big enough. And even when companies say, we're going to go global, but we'll use Australia, we'll test here, we'll launch here, if the global mentality mindset is actually not built into everything that they do, it's actually quite hard to retrofit. And so this is where I think New Zealand is beating us, and it's not about population, right? Because they're a small population, but the per capita output that they're getting of high quality global companies that are going to compete on a global stage is outpacing us. And so there's something special in New Zealand, and they have every right to be attracting the attention and the capital that they are right now.
Can I add just one thing to that? I think that having had some experience in the startup ecosystem in New Zealand about 10 years ago. They've got a really good backbone. I mean, organisations like Icehouse, right, which is probably the most successful incubator in Auckland. It's been around for 20 years, doing some great things. I think that they originally had this backbone on which they could build these successful companies, right? And also I think that, I could be wrong here, you correct me if I'm wrong, but they've got some specialty industries that they're really, really good at compared to
Well, I mean,
maybe
New Zealand as a whole is really good at primaries, but that's not where we're seeing them necessarily spike. I mean, they are spiking in ag tech, but even just their deep tech, their technology, their SaaS is extremely strong. So what we're seeing is actually their startups, their startup like distribution across industry is actually a much richer basket than their typical like export basket is, which is really good for an economy. This is where WA needs to think about their export basket and the concentration in a few different markets, or just a market. And when we want to think about what is the future of Australia's economy, the future of WA's economy, this is where startups and technology can really play a role in diversification. And like, if we're not seizing this opportunity right now, that's going to be really problematic in the very near future, I think.
That's really cool, thank you. And what you said then about the going global part and that diversity in New Zealand, if we look at that slide that you had up before with the WA success stories, I'm pretty sure all of them started with the global perspective. So you can pretty much look at all of them and go, they were, from day one, they had global opportunities and issues on, and they were, and that is a very diverse spread. So actually, I really like that point about New Zealand as a comparable, or as a good example. Because we're always going, oh, what should we compare? Where's the compare? The last place you think, no disrespect, would be the comparison to New Zealand and how they are doing it and what they're doing. So that's a really good value bomb, if you like, of what's going on so far.
Just jumping in on that, I did a little bit of Googling this morning. Well, just because Innovation Bay has the New Zealand connection, so does AWS. Auckland is 2,155 kilometres from Perth, and Perth's from Sydney, and Perth's 3,295 kilometres. We're further away than New Zealand is. Their population is 4.8, and ours is a little bit. It's 2.6, yeah. But one very striking difference in terms of proportions, they've got 16 angel groups. We've got 3. If you count Innovation Bay as a group, there's Southwest Angels, which started this year, and Perth Angels. So is part of the problem about why we haven't got more VC here is that we're not funding the early stage of the pipeline?
Comments about around the accelerator and incubator impact on the VC opportunities. So the angel impact on the VC opportunities and the successes. So if you come back and look at the success wins, where do you guys think angels fit in making that happen more?
I'm going to say I don't think it's just an angel. So there was a couple of things that Rachael mentioned. One of the things that strikes me about New Zealand is it has a need. It has a need to do something that thinks about things globally. So when you start that conversation, you think to yourself, well, I'm not selling to the guy down the road. I've got to sell to those people over there. Otherwise, I'm not going to exist in 3 months' time. That's a very different mindset to start the company in the first place. That gives you the oomph to go out and find those people who can tell you what you're going to do. The fact that there are 16 incubators, 16 angel groups in New Zealand is not necessarily reflective of there's more people with money to invest in startups. It's because there's more people who are interested to be invested in. They've got that greater level of hunger, they've got that greater level of need, they want to go and find that. So why wouldn't you be an angel? Why wouldn't you have a set of angel groups there? So going back to your question, instead of procrastinating around it, one of the things I think is really important is helping people here not necessarily just receive money and go forward. But it's helping them understand how they're going to drive that level of attraction for people to come and talk to them, or to get to the people, or to be introduced to the people who can actually help them. The angel aspect from a financial side isn't necessarily, I think, the problem.
I would argue that WA probably has a phenomenal number of angel groups. They're just not investing in startups. Yeah, and they're not groups, like they're individuals. Like I think you've got a lot of money here, and it's risk capital that's happy to invest in very early stage opportunities. It's just not necessarily SaaS opportunities or what you would typically put under the umbrella of a startup. So I think it's careful how we define this, I think, and it's about how do we put the right sort of structures in place to encourage them to maybe look outside what they would be used to investing in. And part of that equation is education, and part of that equation is them having less options to invest elsewhere. Like it's just like market drivers. But I also think that the issue with New Zealand about having 16 different angel groups is I'm not sure that is the thing that we need to be focused on. I think it is, do we have seed stage funding in our ecosystem that can help the top of the funnel? Because if we're only getting companies or ideas to a certain stage and then there isn't anything to fill that gap, whether it's angel investors or whether it's seed stage funds or another mechanism, that's where we'll probably fall over.
Yeah, and I think just elaborating on Elaine's comment, it's really easy to make money in WA. And that's part of the difficulty to then say to these people who can turn their money around with having made a return within 6 months to a year, now I want your money for 5 to 10, and I may or may not provide you with I've probably got the same likelihood of success, so 1 in 10 likelihood of success. So it's a really difficult kind of financial decision for them. And the other thing is often the people with the really large family offices have a very experienced finance, investment banking person running the office who will say, show me your times revenue and then show me your revenues, whereas we're saying sort of we're at least 5 years to market. So it's a definite mismatch of what they're looking for and what a startup will necessarily provide. So I totally agree, education and somehow figuring out how to incentivize them to invest in startup.
Make it more attractive and tell the stories about it.
And then returns.
Yeah. That's the making it attractive part, I think.
And I do want to say, it sounds a bit doom and gloom, this conversation, doesn't it? But our $10 million fund is made purely up of high net worth individuals who are investing in early stage SaaS companies specific to resources and asset intensive businesses. So it exists, and it's here in WA as well. So it's not non-existent at all. It's just not at the moment that prevalent. So let's make it more attractive.
I also want to put a positive comment into the mix, and that is, we're speaking right now around the tyranny of distance that WA experiences being far away from the East Coast or far away from overseas investors, etc. And actually, the tyranny of distance can become the advantage of distance. And what I mean specifically is when you are here and you need to get on a plane to do your business, that makes it really hard and really cost ineffective to run a business. And so I want to see WA spike in SaaS products that are self-service onboarding that allow people to, come on, use the product, pay for the product, and so that you're making money when you sleep. And I've talked about this in general in Australia. I think that Australia spikes really well on SaaS products that are self-service because we can't have boots on the ground in all the countries in which we want customers, and we can't always fly and have a face-to-face sales conversation. And so when you can have zero sales force and that's the people, not the company. But you can have a no Salesforce company that makes money. Like, you literally are making money while you sleep and the rest of the world is using your product. And so I encourage everyone who feels isolated here in WA to actually drive that into your product and figure out how your customer experience then is created around a low touch or a low sales model. This is an opportunity, not a tyranny.
Great segue, Rachel. So a couple of things. One, Nuheara was started 4 years ago. We've raised over 35 million. We have been way more capital efficient than anyone in our industry in the globe. Good comparison is our closest competitor that I used to hate during the first 3 years of our existence because they took so much oxygen out of our industry. Set up their business south of market in San Francisco, hired 100 people, burned through $100 million in 3 years, are out of business today. We probably burned about a third of what they did. We're more advanced than what they were, and we're still around and thriving. Now, why and how did we do that? We did it, one, because Western Australia is actually a pretty cost-efficient place to build a business. It's actually a very cost-efficient place to build a business. We pay our engineers very well here, but it's nowhere near what would have had to pay them in San Francisco. That's the first thing. Second thing is, Australian government gave us 42 cents in every dollar we spent in research and development. We get about $2 million back from the Australian government every year for our investment in research and development in Perth. 3, we've got tremendous talent here in Perth. I mean, we've hired really well here, not just in the engineering department. I've hired 4 people in our marketing department since I've been back in Perth. And they're all really good. Just as good as anyone I would have hired in San Francisco. So there's really good talent here. Probably plenty of you guys. Really great talent. Okay. 4th, exchange rate factor. So if you're selling overseas, Perth is an incredibly cost-efficient place to build a business. So the point here is, actually Perth, because of the tyranny of distance, is actually a great place to build a tech company, if you've got that global reach. And then just to follow on from your other comment, our direct-to-consumer business is thriving at the moment. We sell more product overnight than some of our biggest retail partners overseas in the US and the UK, all from our office in Perth. Okay, so you can build a great business using technology from a direct-to-consumer perspective out of Perth. It's a great place to build a business. And hey, I get to swim at City Beach every morning at 6 a.m, right? So my point is, this is actually a great place to build a business. You've got to have that global perspective initially. And you've got to set up your business the right way, but it can be done.
Yeah, I was gonna, I wanted to add 2 examples to what I was talking about in just creating self-service, SaaS products. Canva, these are 2 cliche examples, but they're good ones because everyone knows them and they've had exciting results. But 50% of Canva's revenue happens from the US. They do not have 1 team member on the ground there. So they're now starting to build out a team because they're going after enterprise. But for their direct-to-consumer play, not 1 salesperson. Atlassian is another example, right? And so if you could look, don't let the tail wag the dog, but if you are a software company or a SaaS play, think about how you create those low-friction customer onboarding experiences. You can do it from here. You don't need to have those sales teams spun up. You can enjoy living in the best country in the world, apparently the best city in the world, and literally make money overnight. Oh, there's a stat that apparently everyone in Perth knows. So to just further David's point about why Perth is so amazing, is that from a time zone perspective, you guys share a time zone with 60% of the world's population. And if you plus or minus an hour in either direction, you go up to 75%. So this is actually a pretty impressive place to also launch into Asia. If you want to do business with Asia, especially again a self-service business, or even a business that you need to be on the phone with them. I think Perth has a pretty choice position on the globe from that perspective.
That's awesome, and that was exactly, if you like, takeover and get caught up in there's all problems. That's the success businesses are going well with the limited, local VC money. There is money in Perth. There are good businesses. The classic cliche: it's a good project, you will get funded, and then you have all of those benefits of actually basing it out of here. So, while we have, is there a problem? Is there really a problem?
Yes. Well, I mean, look, we're at some point, and each territory will be different. We're going to have to find a way to transition out of our reliance on resources or, primary industries or manufacturing. That's an inevitability, and I think this is an exponential issue where for every year or decade that we don't invest in knowledge-based industries or new industries, or at least sowing the seeds to get these things off the ground, we will put ourselves behind others that are doing this by decades. And so the thing that, and Jasmine and I were talking about this before, one of the things that, the drum that I will keep beating wherever I get asked to speak is that I just think we're not treating this with enough sense of urgency. And I get kind of why we're not, but I just think that for every minute that we're not catalysing this industry, this sector, we're going to just find ourselves in big trouble down the track from an economic standpoint. Let's not even talk about the jobs, just our economic stability and our ability as a country to kind of sustain ourselves. I think we're going to find ourselves in a pickle if we don't invest in this sector more thoroughly and comprehensively.
That is awesome. So that, back to the beginning, what's the point of establishing or facilitating those conversations more with VCs or having more VCs here? Accelerate the growth of the opportunities that are here. Did you want to go in?
Yes, I did, Steve. Yeah. So, the question I've got here is, how important do you think it is for the state and federal governments to support the establishment of a healthy VC ecosystem? What is the government role? I mean, we do hear a lot in WA about it's not government's role to pick winners, which is investing in specific companies is picking winners. So if there's going to be government investment into something, how should it be done? I mean, Elaine, you've seen a couple of different models. What do you think works?
I think yes is the short answer to your question, because even if we look at a lot of the big 4 funds at the moment, a lot of them started with government investment early on, right? So they're probably not taking it now, but it was a kickstart for them. And the whole VC industry, certainly the 1.0 version, 20 years ago was kickstarted by federal government investment. So because of the points that Kath just made, where people have options and therefore there needs to be something that makes it attractive to bring investors in the first place, there does sometimes need to be some enzymatic activity here which the government provides, which catalyses these things. I think that's super important, and what we saw, particularly if what you're trying to do is supercharge this, you're not going to just let it grow and develop organically, which our Eastern brethren have probably had some ability to do that. But if you're trying to kind of get this moving more quickly, a bit like an affirmative action, you kind of have to stoke the fire. In Queensland, when we set up the Business Development Fund, the structural element of that fund that made it attractive to bring investment into Queensland was that the co-investors could buy the Queensland government's co-investment out at cost down the track. So if the company shoots the lights out, the co-investor gets to benefit from the government's investment and put no extra risk in. So that's hugely attractive.
And that's for lead investors.
Yeah. And so what that did is, Queensland probably had, prior to the BDF being introduced, probably 5 to 10 proper VC investments per year maybe. we've invested through the BDF in 80 companies, and that's attracted capital from, you know, local angel investors who, for some it's their, you know, their own 80th investment, for some it's their first or second, international investors and interstate investors who've never invested there before.
Those 80 companies, what sort of period are we talking here?
Over the last 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. And then South Australia, you know, we absolutely needed a government intervention to sort of establish a fund manager, because we were just so transitory in terms of, you know, investors flying in and flying out, and seeing great companies and sometimes investing. But what we didn't get then was this persistence within the ecosystem of risk capital that was actually then participating in the ecosystem. So it's not, if what you're trying to do is grow your ecosystem to be something sustainable that's going to generate these new industries, you need the participants to be in that ecosystem and to participate actively for a substantial period of time. It's not enough to just have investors come in and out. So in South Australia, that was the real driver behind the government establishing the South Australian Venture Fund. And this is going to spawn a whole bunch of other great initiatives, and that's awesome. But in those two particular cases, I think it was really important. And if you look at a more macro level for the Australian VC industry, it wouldn't probably exist to the level it did now if the federal government didn't intervene.
And just looking, I guess, at another model with Brandon, they originally, the state government participated to put the first outside of Melbourne and Sydney. I was the first office, and that was based in WA. So without the government having supported, a salary to have an office in WA, we wouldn't have either Oncores or Experience, because it took me going around and meeting a whole bunch of clinicians and then working on both of those projects for both of them for 4 years before they got investment. So yeah, I guess that's another model, and the actual expense and what they had to put to help establish the WA office was not a huge amount of money. So if they're able to do that with other funds as well, then we also then get that diversity of investors, which we very much need to be able to have a diversity of our startups getting funded.
No, I think it's a bit of that loop, right? So picking up what Elaine said about the idea of kickstarting things off, and then what Dave was saying about being able to get access to the right people and make smart decisions and think about things a bit more broadly. Right? I don't think it really matters whether it's the government or another entity. If the government can help kickstart that off, and that is investment, which then creates companies who then they create an attractive proposition for external people, so we get more skills, get more experience, and the whole flywheel gets going. Great, right? But if it's pure provision of skills or connections, the New Zealand example, I think, of the trade group doing a great job of going outside and dragging investment in, that's another way of kicking off as well.
That's the point. There are lots of good examples of different ways the government can kick in to support the thing.
Can I plug one?
Yeah, that's what I was about.
So aside from my day job, I sit on the EPC, which is the committee it's a federal committee from the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science. And so we do the commercialization and acceleration grants. So this is non-dilutive capital up to $1 million for your product or idea. And it is specifically meant to bridge this gap between having a great idea that needs to be commercialized that's not yet investment ready because the patient risk capital for that investment does not exist. And so, if we believe this is the money that will get you over the line, that then will, have you on your way. This is a great program that you should all look into. I just looked at my stats here, and over the last few years, the distribution of money that we put into WA has been 8% of the total distributed. So that is less from a kind of population distribution than we should be seeing in WA. So everyone should get on this, because it's, like I said, it's free money. It also comes with great, coaching and mentoring and expertise to help convert this. The program, we don't talk about this enough, but the program has attracted 4x private capital for every dollar that it's invested or that it's granted. So again, getting this grant not only gets you over that valley of death, but likely gets you to a point where you can attract private capital as well. So just a plug to look into the commercialization and acceleration programs that your federal government has in place for you right now, that you as a state are underutilizing.
Doesn't the guy that run that live in Western Australia?
Mr. Larry Lopez.
Maybe you should talk to him about increasing the percentage over here.
So actually, I'm the one who's distributing the money. I'm the one making the decision. Larry's the one, cracking the whip. But we don't. Yeah.
I'll talk to him about that on Friday.
We distribute blindly, but we need to see the applications. So bring them to us.
By the way, that is a great program. I mean, and I think in terms of government support, I mean, how much money have you guys distributed to how many startups over the last multiple years it's been going? It's been I'm sure there's a lot of companies that haven't got anywhere near as far as they could get without that help.
Yeah, it would make us one of the larger venture funds in the country. And also, these aren't publicly available stats, so I'm just kind of spitballing, but when I look at the distribution of the money we've invested in WA, about 60% is going into ideas, products, or technologies that's around mining and advanced manufacturing. So we're still over-indexed towards our traditional industries here. Now that's good, like this can be a halfway house, right? If we start to think about what are the technology products and services that is serving that industry, that's like a step forward. But we need to think about diversifying the companies, the products, the technology that come out of WA, so we get a much richer basket of exports.
That's great, thank you. So that's the Accelerating Commercialisation Program. Cheryl and Charlie look after that. So any attendees need to know who to go to. Cheryl and Charlie, and Anne Fury is a superstar in that area. So there we go, there's that. R&D tax is another awesome program. Yes, so the government is throwing good money at great programs at the federal level in the non-VC style, and then Entrepreneurs Program does extend into mentoring and those sorts of things as well, which is fantastic, which is again part of that skills growth. So there are different ways for people to getting access to skills through what the programs that do exist, and perhaps we're not utilising them enough. Perhaps those programs aren't going unutilised enough. The R&D tax program, you can debt fund against it now. So you can leverage that cash and have to wait for 12 months to get it back in. And there are different angles to play. And one of the guys said on the panel last time about that. So there are different angles to play with the programs we have. So the underdog status of efficient capital use and those sorts of things really give us a strong leg up. So lots of great stories in there as well. Is there a bad way for the government to play in innovation? So we throw all these around. It was a random one. Is there something they can do that they shouldn't do?
Yeah, if they control it. I mean, they need to give the money to people that know what they're doing. Like Larry's team, Rachael's team. So that would be my answer to that. I've seen too many examples over the years of Australian government money being put into areas that were a complete waste of time.
So using the right experts on the programs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's keep kicking on. Does anybody have a specific direction they want? Has anybody got a comment or a question they want to bring up that they think we've missed so far on this topic? I've got plenty more, but from Roundtable, we're not into audience time yet. So audience, keep an eye on your questions. We will come to you, so we will get involved shortly. Does anybody here have anything they want?
Make fun with them if you want.
Oh,
Maybe their questions will be too.
Well, no, this is a random. I'm going to give away my microphone. Well, let's. You want to go wild and free? You guys, you got questions already? Yeah, of course we've got questions already. Okay, well let's make sure we get them in then. Come on, bring in your questions. Yep.
Hello, how you going? My name's Josh. Someone's enjoying looking at you back there the whole presentation. Just want to ask a quick question. In terms of advertising from VCs and programs, so there was a lot of talk about access to different programs and stuff like that, but I don't know, I think I met you before through the Entrepreneurs Organisation.
Maybe I get around.
Yeah. So I went through the Program Entrepreneurs Organisation. They basically... they did a pitch night essentially and ran across the whole of WA, Australia, and then went nationally, huge elsewhere, but in Australia and specifically Perth, very little was known about it. I went to a lunch, I met a guy who sort of described it to me, and basically I want by default to go to nationals in Toronto because no one else in Australia applied. No one else in Perth applied. This was a huge grant, this was a huge opportunity. And when I chat to people down it, it's just no one really knows that these things are out there, and they're finding it very hard, especially in the university level. If anyone wants to put together an idea, get the idea generated, put something together, get a team together, trying to find a coherent space to find money who's interested. If you Googled pitch nights in WA in 2018, you had 3 that really came up in Google. And that was Perth Angels, one I think at Spacecubed, and the other one was at Bloom. Apart from that, there was only 3 events, and no one really knew what was going on or where these things were going. So in terms of actually VCs, like getting that critical mass of people who are looking for money, but also reaching them, I think there's a real disconnect there about actually getting to the market and saying, hey, there's money available here.
Cool, thanks Josh. Yes, I do remember, thank you. Yeah, great organisation. Yeah. So good question. So to help the ecosystem, how is the role of innovation by angel groups or Bloom, is that role big enough, and how much more could they do to try to make sure to share that so that it's easier to Google search where do I go? So it comes back to the problem. If there are accelerators, would they solve this problem? Why hasn't this problem been solved? We've got loads of great people. We've got Josh here, who's a great project, been all the way around the world already. How come it was so hard for him to actually figure out what to do in this day and age? You got a comment on that?
I don't have a good answer. it's the short answer. So to your first point about VCs, they're their own kind of masters. If they want to advertise, they will. If they don't, and they want you to come to them, they're a fickle beast. But I think your broader question was more around, there are so many different funding programs. Why is there no central site or place where you can just go and understand what is available and what events are going on? Again, I don't have a great answer for that, but this is part of what community role, a true sense of community or a true ecosystem will have key people within that group that sort of naturally float to the top, that end up being kind of the cheerleaders, the marshals who kind of get that information to the grassroots, which is why I think there does need to be more focus on how do you build your grassroots community from the ground up as well. But then, if I channel my dad for just a second, my dad would be like, it's not up to them to tell you what money is available, it's up to you to kind of seek it out and really, go the extra mile past a Google search to find out what the options are. And so I think you've got to all kind of meet in the middle a little bit.
When I think about ecosystem health, I think about 2 things. One is birth rate and one is death rate. The birth rate is obviously at the top of the funnel. How big is our total ecosystem? And the death rate is what does the shape of the funnel look like, and how can we increase the width at every stage, which means more companies are living day to day. And I think that community is a critical ingredient that helps to impact both birth rate and death rate. And so to Elaine's point, the best ecosystems we have globally have a few central players, whether they're spaces or whether they're entities or whether they're individuals, who really bring everyone together, either physically or virtually, or even just events in one place. But it's critical to, one, know that you're not alone, because entrepreneurial endeavors can be a very lonely and taxing ride. So you get a sense of community. Chances are the first few ideas you have don't stick, and this is an opportunity to challenge your thinking, test new ideas, meet new people, create new co-founders, find team members, etc. So that serendipity that community brings is important. And then also, when there is a critical mass, outside visitors know where to come. And so, like, for us, we know when to come to Perth, and that is for West Tech Fest, right? That's like something we can put our hands around, and we know that we can have a high leverage week here in Perth. So good community gives people an idea, gives internal, like, community members an idea of how to navigate, and gives external people an idea of how to engage from the outside in.
So, just wanted to add to that, in Perth, really the best place to find out about startup is Startup News. They do a great job of on the events front and just news generally. I think that it's really getting much more active at the moment. Spacecubed as well. But I think if you want to look nationally, I think the group that's doing it best is probably Startup Vic in terms of an organisation. But there are a bunch of websites out there, some that are quite new, but they're not going to survive because the business model doesn't exist to keep the data fresh. So there's Startup Status, there's another one that's doing accelerator programs, and the information's current at the moment, but 6 months down the track it's going to be much less useful because I don't think they've got a good business model for keeping it live, and there's no government funding for that. So it's really just look for the places, go to conferences, go to some of the big conferences, StartCon in Sydney, Startup Grind I didn't find as useful in terms of there wasn't the community components around it. I hear South Start was very good.
Any other? We can keep going around the grounds. We got a hat and we got a question.
I love a hat, especially on hot days like this. Jack's my name. So my question is, you're mentioning government funding before, and South Australia's ecosystem roughly the same size as WA's. But when I open up like the Startup WA ecosystem report, I can see that South Australia's state government funding is 450 million, and our state government funding is 16 million. So maybe we could talk a bit about that, and maybe what the blocker is for the WA state government to get involved.
Can I answer that? I don't think the Western Australian government has been to the Nuheara office. Say no more.
I'll give you my perspective, just to remember how I think South Australia government has looked at it, which is that South Australia's economy is going backwards. We've got the highest unemployment rate in Australia, and if we don't do something pretty urgently to replace a whole bunch of lost economic contribution, because we've lost holdings and there's no manufacturing jobs anymore, and a lot of the things that we used to rely on for jobs have gone and are being replaced. That we need a urgent set of initiatives to replace it, or else we'll be like a country town that people visit on the road to Melbourne. So I just think there is, I don't know, but I suspect there is just more prosperity here and less lack of urgency to no burning platform, exactly.
No, not necessarily. It's short-term rational. I don't know. Well, this is where I get sometimes frustrated when people say like, "Oh, Australian investors don't have the risk appetite." It's like, yes, but also if they are rational and they're making money equal or greater in other industries, then they're actually very good investors, right? It's only when property starts to turn or resources starts to turn where all of a sudden it becomes irrational for them to invest there. So in the same way, I just think that people are short-term in their thinking, and in WA I can only assume that because there's not a near-term burning platform, our elected officials are also elected in near-term chunks of time. Our corporate CEOs are rewarded in near-term chunks of time, and the market is a very near-term reward system then it is irrational for many of the people for whom we need to be making long-term bets. It's irrational for them to make those bets, and that's problematic.
And I think also going to David's point, we don't celebrate the success stories that we've had. So we have a great reputation as a state that has incredible success in mining and a bit in mining technology as well, a great reputation for sporting heroes, and we don't celebrate the amazing success that we have had in the innovation. No one knows that story because there's too much news going out about other things. So I think we need to make sure we help craft a story and share that success, even if it starts at that grassroots level, that we all become more aware of the success and what is happening in WA.
And I think it is exactly not just about celebrating success, it's about that storytelling.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I know I was being cynical earlier on, but I think the success stories in Western Australia, the tech success stories in Western Australia, need to craft the narrative and find the key people in the government. I don't know who they are, too fresh in the state, but we need to craft the narrative to tell them and to explain to them that there's actually a great story here. There's some great companies that are being built here and are being built here that couldn't have been built as effectively anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, it's about telling a story.
There's one story that we don't have yet, and we don't actually have it anywhere, even in Sydney, and that is the story that goes beyond an isolated one company success and talks about the network effects of when a successful company spits out hundreds of founders and mentors and angel investors and VC funds. And I think we were, Atlassian should have been that. I think there are a whole bunch of reasons why it wasn't, largely because of our tax treatment of ESOP back in the day, which made it actually very tax disadvantageous to give employees stock options. But if you look at what happened in Silicon Valley, and I don't want to go there, but we will right now. You look at what happened with eBay and PayPal and the network effect that those early employees and the success and wealth that was generated in basically 10 people. You can track 70% of startups in San Francisco back to them, whether it's through their money or through their network or through their talent, but something. And we don't have that flywheel spinning here. And so we can say we have success, we're not telling that story. But the true success is when we have these flywheels spinning, where success, the blast radius far exceeds a single point of origin. And that's what we need to get to if we really want to play ball.
Is that happening in Sydney? Okay, it's still not happening in Sydney.
So again, we wanted Atlassian to be that, but I don't think it created enough wealth dispersal as it should have. It created two extremely wealthy founders who are doing a great job. Right, so they are giving back. They're running 2 funds. They're mentoring. They're doing their part. But a company of that size with that value, we should have had 1,000 people doing that. And I think there are a whole reason. I have a whole theory on why that's not happening. I would love to see 5 years that Canva spits out 500 new founders, 250 angel investors, like that. When we get some sort of liquidation from. Some sort of liquidity event from that company.
I think also along with that, the point that Elaine I think was making was also we need to take people along the journey and not just make it about the success, because the success is talked about in one news cycle and then everyone forgets about it. And in terms of education of investors and things, I think we need to take them along the journey a little bit more, let them see a little bit into the highs and lows, and also to help get community backing along the way.
So just in the audience, who knows more than one company on this list? More than 5? Do you know how they got there, what they're doing, and where they're going? So if we look at success stories and sharing success stories, do we know enough about these ones? And they're not a billion unicorn, they haven't spun out all that stuff, which is great. But if these guys are going hard, they're doing really well. They've still got a long way to go, and they've got awesome runs on the board, and they're still going. If we just had a book of this as the stories of what we've done with what we've got, and yes, this could get better and bigger, the network effect of sharing this knowledge. Where did they get their connection? Where did Sapien come from to start with? How did it spin out? Why did it spin out? What did that do?
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit about, like, one of the communication challenges I think we face is that the oft quoted, oh, this is a destroyer of jobs, as opposed to, like, news, and especially politicians like to talk about how their investment is creating jobs. So there's some, like, really obvious things that we need to find a way to kind of communicate, so it takes the fear out of what we're doing. But then it's also about how do we make the general public more familiar with the types of things that these companies are doing. So I don't know where Rio Tinto is going, for example. So I'm not expecting the general public to know where any of these companies are going, but to have a bit more familiarity around what they are doing, so that it actually makes sense to people. Because, Kath's point about taking people through the journey, the flip side to government investment and innovation is that it becomes a political football, so that at some point this will happen. The other side will say, $450 million, what has that created? Because the lag time here is so long for any meaningful measure of success that it ends up kind of just dissolving eventually if it's not managed correctly. And I think part of that emotion is taking people through the journey. Part of it is giving the general public a bit more familiarity around what these new industries are and taking some of the fear out of it as well. But that's just to keep or even approach status quo. That's not to get to the real success that Rachael was talking about, which is, how do we really supercharge this?
Yeah, I mean, take Nuheara for instance. Justin and I grew a previous hearing technology company based out of Perth, still going, called Sensia. We probably had at the peak 20 people on the team here in Perth. We've now got 40 people at Nuheara, and a number of them came from that previous company. But the point here is that if you support a company, there's a very good chance that it will double and triple and quadruple, etc., etc., if you find it has a certain degree of success. So the whole journey of, one startup could spawn other startups that could spawn more jobs, that could spawn a specialisation in a particular industry vertical, etc., etc. That's the long-term benefits and return on investment that we should be talking about.
Well, just to take an extension of that concept, the company at the bottom, Neumann, is the same corporate shell that was used for QPSX, the most successful spin-out company from the University in Western Australia ever, I think. If you look across the telecommunications industry in Australia, you'll find the people scattered right across. So if they're just some, I'm not sure name dropping is going to help, but we didn't see a whole pile of wealth built around that. There were some founders that went on and did other things, and a lot of engineers went through that business, and maybe 100 during its time. But we didn't see enough wealth created in that company for those network effects to
It's largely because of how ESOP used to be in this country. So up until 2014, up until 2015, when you got stock options from your company, it was a tax event on vest instead of exercise. Now this is like very technical tax stuff that's like not that interesting, but it basically meant, for me, when I moved here with Eventbrite, I was on a typical Silicon Valley vesting structure where after my first year cliff, I vested every single month. That meant that I would have a tax event every single month, irrespective of me exercising or extracting any value from that stock. And in 2015, we were still 4.5 years away from IPO. So luckily, the laws were changed, and I think companies that were born like after 2015 or retroactively fixed the ESOP situation, those companies, if they do well, will have more distributed wealth through their employees. I know that for like when I came with Eventbrite, and I saw that first of all this tax burden, it's also an administrative burden as well as a personal tax burden. And I said, shit, how am I going to attract talent to my company when I can't give them stuff? And then I looked around and I was like, oh, no one expected this, and no one knew about this. And it makes me believe that there are very few people who, before that time, would be benefiting from wealth generated from private companies through liquidity events. So all companies post 2015, we have a much better shot.
But I'd just, like to say about QPSX, so whilst there may not have been a lot of people with a lot of wealth generated, I think that has spurned a lot of the startup community in WA. So Rob Neumann, who was one of the inventors of the technology, then who's now the CEO, one of the inventors of the QPSX technology, who's now the CEO of Neumann in the complete circle of life sort of thing. He was also a founder of Stonehenge Ventures. So, and then Matt Callahan was another co-founder of Stonehenge Ventures, and he went into Ipernica, which QPS became after it was QPSX. So I think that yes, maybe not a lot of wealth, but certainly a lot of experience and things came out of that start.
Go to the crowd, the audience. Questions? Yes, sir, here.
Hey, my name is Jack as well. I just wanted
Everyone in Western Australia called Jack.
Pretty much. Yeah. I wanted to further on the point that the success that we don't have in Western Australia, I think that is less about reducing our effect because we don't have the money here, but when we don't have the success, we don't have an instruction manual for how to breed startups or businesses like that. And when we don't have an instruction manual, then how is anyone expected to do that kind of thing? And when you were talking before, is it Stead, about the companies on the board there is a lot of infrastructure out there already, like, for example, the podcast How I Built This. That is pretty much conversations with many of these large technical startups in San Francisco, talking about how they do these startups. And those resources are there, as well as startup school from YC. YC pretty much broadcasts all of their lectures openly. But it's surprising to see how many people who sit in this room, or just like I talk to around Perth, have no idea that these even exist, these resources exist. So I think that having some startups that had success, or people at least pushing in front of the audience, the startup audience, about where they can find these valuable resources might be a more kind of influential piece of help than just generating money into this industry.
One resource is Startup Playbook. So there's 108 episodes of amazing conversations between this man, Rohit Bhargava, and amazing entrepreneurs from across Australia and around the world. So major player in its category, Startup Playbook, uniquely Australian stories. Actually now it's more global, but lots of Australian stories. So add that to your resource list.
And also the podcasts on Startup News as well. There's, I'm not sure how many they're up to now, but there's a considerable number.
The one thing I would say is if you're doing something truly innovative and new in its space, chances are there's not a manual for it. So know that there's going to be like a certain amount of discomfort and doing something for the first time no matter what. That said, we know that statistically when founders or early stage startups have access to know-how, expertise, and mentorship, their likelihood of success or that reduction of failure rate, of death rate that I mentioned before, increases substantially. And we know that there is a chronic undersupply of experienced mentors in Australia, and the distribution of those mentors is also off, and that they tend to be highly concentrated in 2 capital cities and associated with 1 accelerator. So it's an issue.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think it's more valuable finding a mentor or a couple of mentors that can really help you on your path and your journey than listening to a podcast. I will add that you need to be really respectful of those mentors and their time. I mean, I'm mentoring a couple of groups at Siri, and there's a couple of entrepreneurs that I meet for coffee every month, because I particularly like them, and I see that I can add some value, and it's a very informal situation. But I I think what you need to do is find some mentors that can help you just go down the journey. You know, and frankly, entrepreneurs need to find fellow entrepreneurs because it's every day is a different challenge, right? You know, so it's about people. It's about finding people that you can learn from, that you can be inspired by, and you can be respectful of. That's your best way to be a good entrepreneur.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Yeah, you'll have one.
I'm a Canadian that came to Australia and became an American, and I started a company here in 1986, and I was a bit too successful because I was an American and had a lot of software technology that other people didn't have access to. But what I think we have to do here is first of all, let's look at the decisions we're making in climate change and our energy management in the community, and even our mental health is stressed out here a bit. But there is technology now with machine learning and alternatives where we could do a stress test on Western Australia along on the decisions. I mean, BHP could even keep a train on the tracks. I mean, what the heck? And then they blame some one guy, and then the 500,000 cows have drowned over in Queensland, and we're not saying, what is happening? There is something going on in our environment. So I would suggest that we get rid of competition and we start working in collaboration, collaborative housing, collaborative energy, decarbonize our thinking. And we'll get a lot of innovation and creativity that then we can take to the Chinese and to the Thais and to the Indonesians. And I've worked in Africa a lot too. And if we could get 1 cent a month from 6 million people for the rest of our life, we could just help others and not worry about our salaries. So I think it's time to step back in Western Australia and assess how we're making decisions and what the technology can do now to bring decision quality, whether it's, do I put solar panels on my house, and should I have a well bore that does certain activities, and we need our tradespeople back. We import 95% of our liquids are imported. When they close the car industry down, but why don't we reopen it and take old cars and put LNG and electric motors in the cars and create the skills here and then export that to other countries later and stuff like this. So
have we got a question? Have we got a question? So the question, I guess, we're looking for questions, great comments. Love some questions. Thank you. Thank you. Stress test. So collaboration in an ecosystem. I guess there's two directions out of that. Collaboration in an ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem is very collaborative. And the other part to that is just, before we get to that one, just a quick comment from the audience about the panel about a trend, a technology trend that they think that VCs are currently looking for. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Should we be considering specific directions?
I reckon Rachel's actually the best person to answer this. No. Well, yes, but also because AWS do a lot of thinking about the future where it's heading, and that informs a lot of their kind of vertical focus. So, Rachael.
First of all, I'll answer this as Rachel, not as AWS, but I do think that there is a lot of merit in what the gentleman just said, and that there are major human problems that we're on the brink of that are opportunities. And as an investor, my investment thesis, which I've recently refreshed, when I look for things that they kind of look like social impact investments because they play in some of those areas that the gentleman mentioned, but actually those represent a very large and growing market. And that's where I think what he spoke to around collaboration or kind of a deviation from capitalism as we know it, which I in my private life believe in, that we need to revamp capitalism. But I think that right now, capitalism can actually exist in a place that addresses some of these problems because they are large and growing markets. So alternative energy is a large and growing market and is only begun to become more important when we think about waste management. That is a large and growing market and is only going to be more important when we think about alternative proteins, so all of these things that some people can pass off and say like, oh, those are social impact things, or that's like crazy, environmentalism or greenie. Like, they're actually amazing investment opportunities and amazing places where we desperately need innovation for our planet and our humanity, but also they're going to be very lucrative as well.
If I was a VC, I would be investing in companies that are developing technologies that are going to improve people's lives, to improve people's well-being. I mean, disruptive health technologies to me very, very important because they have a human element to it. As an entrepreneur, I wake up in the morning, I go to work knowing that my product helps people, and it gives me a purpose to come to work every day. So if I was an investor, that's the sort of companies I'd be investing in. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. My question is actually targeted to David, but I would like to get everyone's opinion if that's okay. We're here today, everyone in this room, as startups really. Everyone in this room is want to learn a bit more. So we're talking about how to get funded. Obviously everyone's raised a lot of good points, a lot of government, that we need to really crack down on them to make a difference, but congratulations to all of you guys for where you are in this room right now and where you've gone through with your lives, with what you've achieved. So from our position, I really want to understand is, let's say you were sitting here in this chair today and you were wondering, how do I get started? And you knew all the answers that you've learned from your experience. What advice would you give to us to say, okay, this is a pathway I would take? You probably all have different opinions, but I'm curious to know what they are.
Wow, that's a good question. By the way, I've sat in that chair plenty of times over the years. I think I start with surrounding yourself with people you really respect, and people that can add value to your idea and to your life. I was, in a nutshell, I've been an independent entrepreneurial person since I was about 25. So was always searching for new ideas, but I always found, you always find it through collaborating with people that, 1 + 1 = 5, right? So there's a big answer to your question, but I would start with surrounding yourself with the right people and putting yourself in the right situation where you can leverage opportunities.
I guess for me, I'm an accidental entrepreneur, so I've been more on the investor side, and I guess my couple of bits of advice would be, one, you have to be really passionate about what you want to achieve, because some days it is really hard. So it's having that purpose, like David said, that you get up and you really believe in what you're trying to achieve, and come hell or high water, you're going to get there. So it's having the passion and it's having the determination and looking at the hurdles that will rise in your way as they're inevitable, they're going to come, but that's part of the joy of it, because you get to figure out what the solution to the problem is. So I think really having that mindset of embracing the problems that get thrown at you, because that's a big part of it. And then my other bit of advice would be really open to new ideas and where you get advice from. So go to places where you don't necessarily always go into a conversation or to an event expecting something specific, but just open your mind, because you never know where that spark of inspiration or creativity or the next great person that you're going to meet is going to come from.
I'm still sitting in that chair. So Techboard launched in 2015. I've been working on it full time since. First revenues last year from corporate partners and subscribers. I paid myself so I didn't have a big tax bill. but it can be a very long journey, and it feels like I'm still on quite a long journey before this is going to be successful, and it takes a lot of persistence. Hopefully, I'm hoping there's a few things that'll just click over very soon, and you have that, and I guess I wouldn't do what I've done again. So it's basically don't do something because you think it needs to be done unless you figured out how the hell you're going to get paid from it. Or do it for a while, not for too long. I did it for too long before I figured that out. And I still don't really know if this is going to be any more than a small business. I've got plans. But yeah.
So just as a VC, I am perpetually in your seat. So I have to raise money every few years. Kath's the same, right? So we are constantly in your seat, so I totally understand what you're going through. So outside of the normal crap that you can get on the internet, like, you know, have a big market, large and growing market, and, you know, have a unique value proposition and all that kind of stuff, I think there's a couple of character traits that make it easy for you to get funding, and then there is a thing that no one talks about, but so two character traits are obsession, like obsession. You have to be obsessive about what you're doing because it is hard and because you are doing it probably for the first time and because it is mostly shit, the path of an entrepreneur. And you get a couple of great days and this is how you get tricked into staying because you just kept down in the shit for so long that when good stuff happens, you're like, that's amazing. And then you totally blow it out of proportion. So anyway, and so grit, I think, is the other, like having grit and persistence, which Peter talked about too. The thing that no one talks about, which I don't know why, because it's not a dirty secret, is people. You will be eminently more successful and able to raise money if you are genuinely building relationships and networks with people. And not necessarily because you're trying to get something out of it, because you're trying to raise money from that person, but you know, this whole give first mentality, which is where, you know, you'll help someone for no expected return and, you know, down the track it might pay back in some sort of calmer way. But having an ability to really build strong relationships with a whole bunch of people in your ecosystem will actually solve all of the issues that were raised earlier before about how do we get to find out where to raise money, how do we get good mentorship, how do we find out who invests in what. Like, this is like 101 stuff that we should be being taught in primary school, but no one tells you about this, and that is the people side is the most important part in business. And it's sure as hell a super important part of being an entrepreneur or being, you know, successful as an entrepreneur. Can I drop
Yeah, shout out. Oh, cool. And then I'll relay it. That's right.
So when you guys were discussing the accelerators and them being a sausage factory and maybe not being the best option.
Some of them.
So we'll go with what's available here and what's available to us in this situation. So for me, with our vision is we started a company. We got a problem solution fit. We built a team and a really good team of the three of us who all share completely different skills, which it just turned out exactly to be what we needed it to be. I went through the pre-accelerator with Jasmine. So she's seen part of the journey, and the lights have been green for so long. So my vision, so getting to the question, my vision for us was to be able to go through the accelerator program to help us go to that next level. But from being here today, it makes me second guess that. It makes me think that there might be better options for us as a team to go through. So what would your advice be to get around the right mentors, the right people to help take you in that pathway? Where's the places we should be hanging out? Or who are the people we should be speaking to?
Well, it's different for everybody. Everyone's got a different gap in the next phase of their development. So that's what the accelerators are great for. You're here, you want to get to here. That's not going to get you to the end stage, it's going to get you to the end of the accelerator program and get you a skill set or an improvement or a status that then gets you ready to then look for the next step.
So it's what's your strategy? Where are you at? Where do you want to be? Where are your gaps? And how you can fill them? And then find ways to fill them. So if your gaps is dev, if your gaps is finance, if your gaps is sales, whatever it is, then go and look for the people that have done that know who to do that area, and then you can get wrong modelling. So if you go for come see an accountant and you need to build a dev, wrong place to get mentors. So everyone's going to be different. Then you're going to look for where you're at, what you need, and where you're going to go, who's been successful, those sorts of things.
And I'd say also don't just look in WA. So for us, we looked and we went for an LA-based global program. We went for an LA-based global program, and for us that was specifically focused and targeted to what we needed, and I couldn't recommend it more highly. We've learned so much. We've completely changed our strategy. We had our eyes open to things that we would have only found out by mistake in a couple of years otherwise. So yeah, it really depends which industry you're in, whether there's a local accelerator that's going to meet your needs, and then looking more broadly as well.
Also, don't let a comment from two people on a panel that was thrown over in 30 seconds. Don't let that make your path. Like, you need to do your homework. So you need to decide if an accelerator is right for you. You know, we made a comment that the pendulum swung too far, that many of them, that there are more in volume than there are in quality. So it's your job to find out what are the ones that are quality. It's your job to find out who graduated from those programs, what exactly did they get out of it, and the things that they got out of it, is that what you need to get out in your next phase? Like, you need to hustle. Like, this is where you need to figure out, one, is this right for you, yes or no? And two, if so, which one? And be very specific around what you want to get out of it. Who are the mentors in that program? Are they the mentors who are going to be the experts who are going to support you and where you need to go? Is that geography going to be the right place? Is that industry the right place? So, like, hustle. This is your job.
Can I just add one thing? Your guiding light should be your first sale. Every other decision should be based on that goal, on that lighthouse, your guiding light. Yeah. Where am I going to get my first sale, and what's the best way to get there? Right. I see too many over the years. I've seen a lot of Aussie entrepreneurs that thought that their guiding light was to raise some money. Right? It's not the guiding light. The guiding light is to get a sale. It's to actually build a business where you're generating revenue and profit. Right? So it may not be your short-term, requirement, but it's got to be your guiding light.
Could I just come back to your comments, Elaine, about the broken model? Part of that, from the conversation we had before, is actually that these accelerators are set up generally as for-profit businesses, and the way they operate, they're not making a profit, so they can't continue operating. Is that part of it?
There's no money.
Yeah, so my point was that there isn't really money in accelerators, but they've all got their criteria that they need to meet to kind of justify their existence. And so my comment to you before was, I think the rethink, we're going to have a rethink around the accelerator model is, are they a for-profit or are they a charitable or an education program, which I think those two things get run very differently, and then the outcomes are probably quite different as well, and how you pick the people involved and how you incentivize them changes as well. I think really where accelerators can add a lot of value is around the education component and the access to great expertise. If we can meet that criteria 100 different ways, then we should try and do that.
And that's so on the same committee where we do the commercialization and acceleration grants, we also do the ISIs, which are the incubation grants, basically for accelerators. And basically our assessment criteria is exactly what Elaine said. So we don't look at the applications and say, is this going to pump out 12 out of 12 unicorns? We say, what is the educational impact and kind of the blast radius of the impact of this program going to be? And are the experts and mentors that are signed up to this project the ones who are actually going to, one, have a chance of driving success in the companies, but create that real expertise, that knowledge transfer, that education. So we're still giving grants for accelerators, which show that we don't think that they are, like as Elaine fully said, a failed experiment, but we are looking through a very specific lens of what we think this ecosystem needs in this maturation stage, and we look for elements of those in the application.
We're getting close to the end, so we're going to have to start looking for the final questions, but definitely have final questions. Yep.
So I was a co-founder of QBSX as well, and that was over 35 years ago. Just to let you know that the founding chairman is the one who made all the money, and to this day, with Neumann, is still the one who holds all the money. So, built it out.
There was a minimal network effect.
That's right. And he had a mining background. Back to the resources question. I think it was at the last roundtable, one of the speakers made the comment that you wouldn't go to Silicon Valley if you wanted to start up a resources technology company, and you wouldn't necessarily come to Perth if you wanted to start up a SaaS company. So I'm wondering, whether we should maybe be taking advantage of the ecosystem that we have in WA based around the resources industry, and also take into account that some of these global companies themselves are seeing the writing on the wall and moving more into general energy and carbon efficient processes and that kind of thing. Maybe we should latch on to that bandwagon to sustain the local industry.
I would answer that you should absolutely be doing that. You want to take it wherever you have an advantage. You want to try and leverage that advantage, and I think it would be a waste of an opportunity if here in Western Australia you didn't leverage a space for which you have local industry here to collaborate in. To the point I made before about having industry involved and participating in your ecosystem is one of those critical kind of components for success. I think you should. But I think that one of the points that Rachael made earlier was that we shouldn't just do that, because if we just do that, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure. So we've got to try and diversify. Was it export basket? Yeah, the export basket. So not be entirely reliant on the existing strengths that we have, but leverage them as much as we can in the meantime, but try and diversify out beyond that as well. I've just been part of a Queensland plan to try and do something very similar for Queensland. How do we leverage the existing industry strengths that we have there from an innovation and perspective, but also try and set ourselves up for the next decade where we aren't completely reliant on those advantages and those strengths, because we've created some new ones.
So that's fantastic, and I think that the underdog status comes into that. If we always leverage on what we're the best at, it doesn't generate anything new, but it doesn't mean we can't come up with something because we're not the world centre of that thing. Doesn't mean we still can't come up with it and use the underdog status of the SaaS model as the example to make us the best in that place, or that person the best in that place. So I think it works across both of those scenarios.
Yeah, I'm not so sure the comment that if you're a resources technology company, you shouldn't go to Silicon Valley. I mean, we've got a great business model, a great opportunity. Silicon Valley is a great place to go, no matter what business you're in, from a technology perspective.
Yeah, and one thing actually on that is there are a number of Silicon Valley-based medtech startups who look to try and do their first in human trials in Australia. One for the R&D tax, and also for the fact that it's generally easier to test stuff on patients here. But we certainly at Brandon have made, there are a number of companies that will choose, like specifically as part of their business model. So Josh Macauer, who started Biodesign, said the number of times I've chosen to come and do my first in human trials in Australia, it's one of his strategies. So we do have advantages here to capitalise on.
So I think we can wrap it up. Do anybody in our audience, in our panel rather, have anything they'd like to? We've had plenty. We've had some fabulous content. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. You've really shared. You haven't held back, which is always the best part about these. It's honest, it's true, it's straight up.
and it does go in all sorts of directions, which just makes it very interesting. We hope we've given the audience something to take away. I think there was a lot of stuff. I've got notes from one end of the page to the other of the tips and tricks that we just got from these great people. So thank you all so much. If we can all give them a round of applause.
And thank you to our facilitator, Steve. And a big thanks to our venue host, Flux. I forgot to specifically acknowledge them before, so they put on this lovely spread for us. And the drinks are courtesy of RSM. And so grab a drink, have a chat, hang around for a bit, and enjoy the rest of West Tech this week.